Moving right along with today's episode and the third segment on the agenda, talking more NFL schedule. This time, a primetime matchup that is usually on primetime, I should say. The Eagles and the Cowboys. Mostly a must see game, I would assume, in terms of NFL rivalries, divisional rivalries, along with, say, I don't know, the Steelers and the Ravens. Um, I'm trying to think here off the top of my head. This one just jumps right at the top of the list, really, in the NFC East. Giants Eagles, Giants Cowboys, Cowboys Eagles, Cowboys Giants. It's all really mixed in there into the top rivalries in the NFL. Really, just right off the bat for me. In the NFC North, I guess. Really, with Rodgers being there, it hasn't really been much of a rivalry, but also you could throw them in there. But right at the top of the list is this game, and I would assume that every year the NFL would want to have it as a primetime game, but this year it's not the case. For the first time since 2006, the Eagles and the Dallas Cowboys won't be playing either other games on Monday Night Football or on Sunday Night Football, and on top of that, it's also the first time these two won't be playing in a standalone game, meaning a Thursday night an international game or something like that, where it is the only game on at the moment since 2003. So you might be wondering, when are they playing? Well, if you haven't seen each of the team's schedule, both are scheduled to play their first game on CBS in Week 10 at 4:25 Eastern Time in the afternoon, and also their second matchup will come in Week 17, this time on Fox. It's the first time this matchup will be on CBS since 1993 on Halloween, so that is a little bit different because if you do pay attention to how the games are laid out on the networks and everything like that, it's usually NFC games, NFC and NFC opponents playing on Fox, usually in the afternoon, and it's usually the AFC games put off to CBS in the early window or also in the afternoon window. For this game to be on CBS is noteworthy, and it is something that I will touch on in just a few seconds, but the NFL Executive Vice President of Media Distribution, Hans Schroeder, explained a little bit of the reasoning why these two teams aren't playing on primetime this season, to which he said, I think it's important to remember the biggest window of our week typically is the 425 game, so people tend to gravitate just to primetime as being this additional level of exposure, but 425 is every bit as big a window for us, and that was pretty surprising. I didn't necessarily agree with that statement, but that is, according to Hans Schroeder, the executive vice president of media distribution, how the NFL is sort of feeling with the afternoon window. And I know the afternoon games usually are deemed America's game of the week, but again, it didn't really sit well with me. I don't really agree with that, but the NFL contracts, in addition to them not having this game on prime time, are sort of starting to become a bit more flexible in terms of what team plays on what network and stuff like that, alluding back to the fact that I mentioned the AFC games are usually on CBS and the NFC versus NFC games are usually on Fox. But this year, CBS can now show NFC versus NFC games, alluding back obviously to the Eagles and Cowboys being on CBS in Week 10, and also Fox likewise can show AFC versus AFC games now too. Before, it was the other way around, and there's still the possibility that both can be flexed into the primetime slots. If they both have great records and the primetime game originally scheduled isn't really one that a lot of people want to watch, maybe they'll flex it into that spot. That is always still a possibility. But for right now, they are not on primetime as it stands. And it makes you think back to that topic I mentioned in last week's episode about the New York Jets getting 6 primetime games in the first 11 weeks, 7 standalone games for the Jets as well, including their London games. So, you know, if you really are upset about it, couldn't they just fit into one of them and you could take one away from the Jets? I'm pretty sure they wouldn't be upset with 5 primetime games in the first 11 weeks instead of 6. But, again, that's just how the NFL figured out their schedule. They felt that the Jets sort of owed them one, like I mentioned last week. So it is what it is right now at this point. Again, like I mentioned, there is always that possibility it could change, but this sort of points more towards the question on hand now, with this being the case in 2024. Is it a big deal that the Eagles and Cowboys are not on prime time this year. In simple terms, I think it is a big deal. I think it does catch a lot of people's eye again because this is a pretty chippy game, especially over the last few years. With both teams being very well, both on offense and on defense, the kind of personalities you have on both sides. Micah Parsons, Trayvon Diggs, A.J. Brown, Smitty. Now you have Saquon also jumping over to the Eagles and playing against the Cowboys, who back when he was a Giant, probably has some bad feelings towards the Cowboys because they couldn't beat them when he was with the Giants. So I'm sure he feels a sort of type of way towards the Cowboys. So you have that also added on to it. On the defensive side, Brandon Graham, obviously, like I mentioned, Micah Parsons and stuff like that. So it is a trippy game. It is entertaining, and I just think it is a big deal to not have him on prime time because back to me not agreeing with what Hans Schroeder said, it just seems I don't know, like logical that the primetime game is always the bigger one for me because of the fact that there's no other game on television. Primetime, really, if you're trying to watch a game, if it's Sunday and you're still, have that itch to watch more football, you know that there's a late game on and you don't have really any other option but to watch that game, so it draws in more people. At the 425 window, you usually have America's Game of the Week plus three other games, so if it's not really a game that you're really interested in, you could click off of it and go to another game. That's why when he said that the 425 game is usually their biggest game, it didn't really correlate with me for that reason. There's other options so people can just click off of the game if they don't like it. When it's on prime time, they don't have any other option if they really want to watch football to watch that game. So it just made more sense to me in that way. But this is just pointing more towards the idea, the avenue that the TV packages will be cut up even more, distributed a bit differently than they have in the past, usually in the regular season and the playoff games. It points towards the idea that they could be sold separately in the near future, near as in maybe 3 years, 4 years, or something like that. I don't anticipate it being next year, but in probably 3 to 5 years, we could see more of the playoff games, of the standalone big games being sold separately. The NFL would obviously make more money by selling these big games separately, and instead of them saying usually how it is, laid out on the usual plan and how the schedule works out, it usually is, the primetime games, the big games, like the ones on Fox. Whoever's scheduled on Fox, Fox gets the NFC and NFC games. Usually all the NFC games are on Fox. So the big games, regardless of who it is, will just be on Fox at whatever time it is scheduled. By having them being sold separately, you can take one of those games that is usually on Fox and then flex it to a primetime game, give it to some other media company or other broadcasting network to broadcast it themselves if they offer up more money, if their bid is higher than the other networks. I'm sure the NFL will have no problem showing it on theirs. It is just another way to gain more revenue for the NFL, and that seems to be like the way that it is going, especially after the Netflix deal. It incentivizes other networks to sort of pay more for that marquee game to kind of take it away from other networks, especially on Christmas with Netflix, like I just mentioned. Netflix has both of the games this year. That is a guarantee, but going forward, they're only guaranteed one of them. So, depending on what day Christmas falls on, it does incentivize these other networks to sort of bid on those games and give the NFL more money to stream or broadcast these networks. Instead of Netflix getting both of them, they're only guaranteed one in their contract. So one could be on Netflix, and whoever bids higher on the other game will end up getting. It's pretty genius, obviously, for the NFL to do this. It makes more sense for them to gain more revenue with more streaming platforms now taking their picks at it and sort of getting scheduled on odd days. On Friday with NBC and Peacock, you have the one on Christmas this year. Thursday game will be on Peacock as well, if I'm not mistaken. The kickoff game this year between the Chiefs and the Ravens. So it all can get mixed up like that as well. On Saturday, Usually it falls to the NFL Network, but I think this year it will be a good amount of the games also will be on NBC. So how the NFL distributes these games, I think, will just point more towards the idea of them selling them separately to gain more money. And also, I just think we're going to see more of this going forward. This TV shuffling, these games being on Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays. Now that you've opened up the door to it, and if they perform very well and you get a great reception, there's no way the NFL will not try and make this a regular thing. You saw it last year with Christmas, how popular it was. Now I find it very hard to believe that they'll ever stop showing games on Christmas Day, regardless of what day it falls on. The only day that's safe right now is Tuesday, but the way that this is going, I don't anticipate the NFL staying away from Tuesdays anymore than they have to. If an opportunity presents itself to show a game on Tuesday, the NFL will have no problem on doing that. And maybe in the near future, we could have a game on every day of the week at some point in the NFL season. I don't think we're too far from that, and this is just sort of opening that door to that avenue in the near future. But for right now, the Eagles and Cowboys won't be shown on any of those primetime games. They will be reserved for the afternoon games, so let me know what you guys think about that. Seeing that game in the afternoon slot, is it a good idea? Do you hate it? Do you don't mind it? I personally don't really like it, but that's just me. But in saying that, we will move on with more topics on today's show. We have a couple more to get to regarding the schedules as well, starting off with the Steelers having a very difficult end of their 2024 season. I'll break it down for you guys after this break. And also, the Ravens unhappy with how their schedule panned out. Again, a few carrying over difficulties and just problems that they had with their season last year and now carrying over to this year. They're not happy about it. I'll tell you all the reasons why after this break. We'll be right back in just a few seconds.